Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey peeps, today we're going to take a look at Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition from Fantasy Flight Games. This is, of course, the revised version of Mansions of Madness, a game that I enjoyed quite a bit. I own the game and have had it for some years. I just never got around to reviewing it, but of course, since I own it, that must mean that I think it's something at least a little bit special. And if you're not familiar with it, it takes place in the Arkhamverse, which is stuff inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, but with Fantasy Flight Games' own spin on it. They have the same characters, bounce around between each game. Arkham Horror was the original big one, then Mansions of Madness, and then Eldritch Horror, as well as the Call of Cthulhu LCG, and soon to be an Arkham Horror LCG. But they all use the same characters, and sort of, it's H.P. Lovecraft, but by way of Indiana Jones, in a lot of cases. A lot more action-oriented. But in any case, Mansions of Madness set itself apart from the other games because it wasn't that you were running around a city or running around the globe trying to put out the cultists and or kill the cultists and stop the great old ones from being awoken, although that might happen in this game. It's more of a focused sort of beam on just what happens in a creepy, as the name implies, mansion or just some particular area. There were expansions for the first one that had the game taking place outdoors, so on and so forth, but you still take control of the same investigators and you're still trying to do the same kinds of things. Now, in the original Mansions of Madness, what was very important to note is that it was a one versus all game. So one player was the keeper, who was not only the game master, but was actively competing against the other players to murder them, although was also trying to tell a story at the same time. Think of the Overlord from Descent. But in Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition, the Keeper has been replaced with an app. That is the most notable change, but not the only change in this edition of the game. The app takes control of the Keeper, essentially, and runs the entire show. Therefore, all the players in the game are working together cooperatively. And well, it's easier if I just show you how that actually plays out rather than try to explain it to you. So let me go ahead and show you that. I tried to, by the way, record the app, which I can do with some apps, but it wasn't working for this one. I would much rather have just recorded it so you can see it in HD, but I'm just going to have to show you me holding the tablet. Sorry about that. But then I'll go ahead and show you the components of the game. Then we're going to come back and let you know what I think.
Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition is a fully cooperative game for up to 5 players, and you may play it solo. Your goal depends entirely on the scenario, but thematically you're trying to solve a mystery and end dark deeds in one of the titular mansions. The most important thing to mention up front is that you need to have an app to play. Download it on your Android or iOS phone or tablet, then simply open it and start a new game. I will say, however, that if you own the first edition game, you can let the app know that, and it will automatically use some enemies and terrain from that set, as well as allow you to choose the original investigators, and they do include the cards for them in this set. Before we do anything else, I'll go over the components, and there are many of them, so I'll keep it brief. The game comes with many double-sided tiles, which you'll use to construct the maps as the app instructs. There are 6 investigators in this version of the game, and as I said, you may be able to use the original investigators. This consists of miniatures and their player cards. You'll have a health and sanity rating, a special ability, and varying scores and 6 attributes. There are a plethora of monster miniatures. Before using them, you have to install them on a black base, and in the black base you have to slide in a token that indicates the monster's awareness, horror, brawn, and special effects. Search tokens and explore tokens, which have interact and sight tokens on the other side of them, respectively, are how you'll know what to interact with in the world. Clues are useful tokens that can gain you more successes on tests or more puzzle attempts. The dice in the game have success symbols, clue symbols, and blank faces. Clue symbols can become successes by spending clues. There are a bevy of small tiles that will be added as terrain and features of the map, and the investigators may run into and interact with other denizens of the mansion as well. Finally, it wouldn't be a Fantasy Flight game without a lot of cards. Everything from status effects, to story-based items, to a plethora of items for the investigators, including weapons and more useful esoterica, which you'll find as you go throughout the rest of the game. And spells, which, if you're not careful, could backfire on you. Wounds and horror are handled in an interesting way. Whenever you take health or sanity damage, you'll be instructed to draw these cards. If the game says to draw them face down, they just count as a point of that kind of damage. But if you're instructed to draw it face up, you suffer the effect on the other side. Some effects will even force you to flip cards that you already have over. Either way, whenever you reach an amount of points equal to one of these scores, you're out of the game, which will also trigger the end of the game. The most important thing you'll do in Mansions of Madness is choose a scenario with the app. Each scenario has a synopsis blurb, a difficulty rating up to 5, and an average duration. Next, you'll choose the investigators you and the other players will be using. The game will then tell you what your starting equipment is, which could include useful items or even spells, in which you'll communally decide to disperse amongst the players. You'll also each start off with a certain amount of clue tokens. After that, the tale begins, with a creepy quote from Lovecraft and a narrated intro, which I'll skip here in order to not spoil anything for you. The app does have creepy ambient music and sounds, by the way. Anyways, you'll be told what the purpose of your mission is, thematically, and what you have to do as a group. The game next loads the beginning of the map with a final introductory message. You'll need to find the right tiles and set up the map physically in the real world, and place your investigators in the starting room. The app will continue on, describing the details of the first room that you're in detail, and tell you where to put search and explore tokens, denoting areas you can investigate and doors that you can open. Then the game officially begins with the investigator phase. In any order of their choosing, the players will take turns performing 2 actions each. You can move, which is simply moving from one area to another, and possibly having to evade a monster if you're moving out of one space. You can explore by tapping an explore icon on the app, assuming you're in the same room with it. This usually opens a door and will put out more tiles and tokens, and also more story blurbs from the app. In some cases, people and monsters may be added to the board as well, and then you can interact with them. As I just mentioned, you might take the search or interact actions instead, which lets you investigate one of the search tokens or interact with one of the other tokens on the board. Tap the icon on the app, remove the token, and do what the app says, which might also involve tests of one of your attributes, where you'll roll a number of dice equal to your score in that attribute and hope for as many successes as possible. In that case, the app will let you put in how many successes you got and what that means. Another important action is attacking. If there is a monster on the board and within range, you can tap the bottom of the screen to bring up the display of monsters and choose which one you'll target and which type of attack you'll use, as indicated on your item cards. After making your selection, you'll have to pass a test involving one of your attributes. Then take the result for better or for worse. If it deals damage to the monsters, input that and the app will remember until that monster is dead, at which point it will disappear. When every player has taken their 2 actions, it's the Mythos phase, when nasty events occur to impede the progress of the heroes. Then, if there are any active monsters, they will activate by following the instructions on the app. Players will also have to endure horror checks when they first see a monster. Note that, much like in the first Mansions, there are intricate puzzles as well whenever you search and explore an appropriate thing, but now they are handled with the app. Continue with the quest until you've either met your goal, failed the game by either taking too long or messing up, or until at least one player dies, which will trigger the final round.
Now, another thing I want to note here, I didn't want to bog down the overview with it, is that you can actually use your first edition Mansions of Madness components with the second edition. There's a little rule sheet that comes with the game that is a conversion kit that just tells you how you can incorporate the tiles, the miniatures, and the investigators from the first edition into this new edition. In fact, there are brand new cards for all of the investigators, new tiles for the monsters, the little monster tiles, things like that. And there's already planned expansions that will let you incorporate the first edition expansions into the new second edition. So they clearly have a plan here, and they're trying to keep everyone from the first edition happy. I wasn't too worried about it because I'm used to games just getting new editions and the old ones being thrown out, but I'm very happy that now I can use everything. I'm not going to talk about that because I didn't really have a chance to delve too much into using the old stuff. I just wanted to focus on the second edition exclusively because most people, this is going to be their first and only representation of the game. So enough of that, about that, let's get right to it. This completely, assuming that I didn't have to, I wasn't able to use the first edition stuff anyways. This would have completely replaced the first edition. This is so good. I liked the first edition. I really did, but it was so long. The setup was so arduous. The setup is still a little bit of a pain in the ass here, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. And I know that people there's a segment of the board gaming population who, if you're being unkind, as I have been accused of being, I would call them Luddites, who do not want to use an app. They don't want a phone or a tablet or any kind of electronic device anywhere near their games. I can understand that to a degree, but I'm telling you, if you love the original Mansions of Madness and you are rebelling against this version of it because of that app, you are missing out on something special. Because taking control of the keeper, I know that there was some visceral fun to being the keeper. I was always the keeper because that's how it goes in my group. I'm always the one versus the all. And there was some enjoyment to be had there. But for the most part, it was an arduous pain, which was sad because it was such a great game. But the app not only takes control, it does it seamlessly. And it makes it so that you really... The most important thing about this is theme. You really, really feel like you are playing through a haunted house story that is creepy, and if you have creepy music playing in the background, that's even better. And just... You don't know this mystery. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what you're about to click on or what you're about to see, what monster's about to pop out, and the story is changing. And there's enough scenarios in the app that I think it keeps it very interesting. Let's handle this like a normal review. So we'll start with the components. The component quality, I would say, is as good as the original, which is to say the tiles look good and the cards and all of that. The miniatures... It's not that they're bad. I'm not a miniature aficionado. I don't really care. They look well enough for me. But they are hard to get in some of the bases, and they're very bendy. Some of them are definitely misshaped. Not misshapen, but their arms aren't bending in the right way. They're just wobbly, that type of stuff. So it's not the best quality, but still the presentation is good, especially if you have those first edition minis that you would also use, because there's some even better looking monsters like the Shoggoth in that one. But regardless... I think these look okay. The app itself, how it works, is very smooth. We didn't have any problems with it, but I should note that we played a version that was patched already. I had heard and read some reviews that said it was just a buggy mess in the first iteration. So we got a version that was working just fine. So your mileage might vary on that. You might have already had a bad experience with it, or maybe you have a version that's not updated. So I encourage you to update it if you haven't, if you're playing with it. Because ours, it went fine. There was maybe like one time that I can't even remember the exact glitch that something happened, but it was fine and it cleared up. And other than that, it's very easy to use. It's very simple to get into. In fact, when I started playing with it, or when we all started playing with it, I was like, oh, wait, we must be missing something. No, this is how it works. It's just, here's how you set it up, and here's how you play, and then you start clicking on things. One person definitely, even though you're not the keeper, you need to sort of be in charge. It's better than trying to pass it around and say, okay, now read the thing that you just saw. It's better if just one person reads, I think. Maybe it's because I'm a big loudmouth and I insisted I'm that person, but I still think it would be better in any group if it's just one person was in charge of the tablet or the phone or whatever. We use a tablet. But that's fine. So all the component quality and just the utility of everything was perfectly fine. And then as far as the gameplay goes, like I said, the theme is fantastic here. Everything is very intuitive. The dice system, I think, works better here. The whole system of how you take the different wounds, whether it's a physical wound or the horror or damage to your sanity, is very interesting here, because it might just, you have these cards that you're taking as these persistent wounds, but then they might have nasty effects to you, and it actually works very cool how you might cards might tell you to flip over other cards. It's a very interesting little system there. It's also great how the puzzles are now part of the app as well. I actually thought it was kind of neat that the old puzzles were actual puzzles, like cardboard pieces that you had to interlock and switch around. But again, it was arduous. It was a big pain. Now that the app takes care of that, I think it works a lot better, and the sky is the limit as far as what they can do in the future with more scenarios. And again, I think there's more than enough scenarios in the base game to keep you occupied for quite a while. But there's, of course, more on the way. If I could complain about the game, I would say that it's still a little bit too long, but it's not overly long, and it was enjoyable. The whole time we were having fun with it, so it's hard to complain when something is not excessively long. There's another really long game that I played recently that we'll get to soon that has a bigger issue with that, and so this one seemed rather mild in comparison. So, but that could be a thing. Also, it can at times feel like you're not doing too much in the game because it's just walk over here, click on this thing, hope for the best, and there doesn't seem to be as much of like in Eldritch Horror, which is another Arkhamverse game, where you're upgrading and getting better all the time. At times it can just feel like you're playing through a choose-your-own-adventure story to some degree, but that's still fine. The point is fun. It's fun, it's thematic, it's very eerie and spooky, which is what I want out of a game like this, as opposed to the other Indiana Jones running around the world type games of the Cthulhu Arkhamverse. And this is what I wanted Mansions of Madness to be originally. More streamlined, more accessible. I could play this with casual gamers. I might not put them in charge of any of the setup, but it's easy to play with anyone, really. And that's great because there's so many people who I have to my group who would want to play a heavier, longer game like Eldritch Horror, but for the fact that it's heavier and longer because the theme is so cool. This is a perfect entry point for them. So that is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. I highly recommend it, even if you had some problems with Mansions of Madness 1st Edition, but you wanted to like it, and you have no problem with apps, you're really, really going to enjoy this one.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.